The first time I saw her again, she was wearing pearls, sipping champagne, and laughing like the past never happened. My mother, sitting at the head of a long banquet table, surrounded by people who adored her. She raised her glass toward the guests, and when our eyes met across the room, her face changed just for a second. Then she smiled and said loudly, "Look, even the waitress wants attention." But back when I was still her daughter, not her shame, I thought she loved me. I was 13 when everything I understood about family collapsed. We lived in a modest brick house in Savannah, Georgia. My father, Marco Clark, was a first-generation Italian-American who ran a small home repair business. He smelled of pine sawdust and always came home whistling some old Dean Martin tune. My mother, Helen, worked part-time at the library and spent her afternoons combing my hair and asking about my homework. Back then, life was slow and safe, until the day he didn't come home. It was a Tuesday. I remember the sunlight looked too bright, like it didn't know what had happened. My father had fallen from scaffolding at a site and died instantly. There was no goodbye, no final words, just a folded uniform and a funeral card with a smiling face. I was too young to understand what kind of hole that would tear through my world. My mother unraveled within weeks. She'd sit by the window in her nightgown for hours, just staring at the garden. I stopped asking her what was for dinner. I started washing my own clothes. Sometimes she'd cry. Other times she didn't speak at all. 6 months later, I came home from school to find her humming in the kitchen, lipstick on, apron dusted with flour. She was making lemon pie, my father's favorite. I almost cried from the nostalgia. But then she said, "Nina, honey, we're having guests. Ife met Shimwin. His name is Dennis. He's coming over tonight." Just like that, Dennis Caldwell showed up with 2 white teeth and a daughter named Kayla. She was 6, blonde, talkative, and immediately adored by my mother. "He brings light into the house," Mom told me that night, as she dabbed perfume behind her ears. "And Kayla needs a stable home. She lost her mother, you know." "But I lost my father," I said. She didn't answer. 2 weeks later, they moved in. It wasn't gradual. Dennis brought boxes. Kayla ran through the halls like she owned them. My room was suddenly too big for one child, and I was moved to the attic guest space. When I came home from school the next day, all my books had been boxed. My desk was gone. "We're redesigning," my mom said casually, flipping through curtain catalogs. What hurt wasn't the change. It was how quickly I became invisible. At dinner, they talked over me. Dennis corrected my manners constantly. Elbows off the table. "Don't chew like that." Kayla would spill juice and giggle, and he'd say, "She's still learning." But when I dropped a fork, he said, "You're 13. No excuse." My mother just sipped her wine and nodded. And then there was Mrs. Caldwell, Dennis's mother. She'd visit every weekend, criticizing everything. One time, I wore my dad's old flannel shirt around the house. She pinched my sleeve and said, "What kind of girl dresses like a lumberjack?" Another time, she caught me reading on the couch. "Lazy posture leads to lazy habits," she muttered, pinching my spine. Mom laughed like it was a joke. The worst came when she'd cup my face with her cold hands and say, "Such a strong jaw for a girl. Are you sure you're not the boy of the house now?" Then she'd pinch until my eyes watered. One night, I looked in the mirror and found a dark bruise blooming on my cheekbone. When I showed Mom, she said, "Don't exaggerate. You bruise like a peach." That was the first night I cried myself to sleep in the attic and realized no one would hear. By the time I turned 14, Kayla had a new bedroom set, violin lessons, and a spot on the cheer squad. I had blisters from walking 2 miles to school because Mom said the gas bill was too high for extra trips. She bought Kayla a pink bike with streamers. Mine had been sold in a garage sale without asking me. I tried to speak up once. I asked if I could join a weekend cooking class at the community center. I'd been watching videos online, secretly collecting recipes in a notebook, dreaming of being a chef one day. Mom barely looked up from folding laundry. Who's going to watch Kayla while you're off playing with knives? I thought maybe Dennis, he works. And Kayla needs stability. You're old enough to help. That was the end of that. Dennis started referring to me as the help. Did the help finish the dishes? Tell the help to clean up Kayla's mess. At first, I thought it was a joke. Then, he started saying it in front of guests. Kayla soaked it up. She began demanding things from me. Juice, snacks, help with homework. Then complained when I got it wrong. You're not smart like my mom, she once said, clutching a spelling book. No wonder Daddy says you'll never get far. I wanted to scream, but instead I just nodded and added another mark to the inside of my closet door, a tally for each time I swallowed a scream. Then came the day everything changed. It was spring, and I'd just returned home early from a canceled field trip. The house was too quiet. I walked into the kitchen and froze. My mother and Dennis were sitting at the table with a man in a suit. On the table, a folder of documents. I caught a glimpse of a name, mine. Full name, social security number, date of birth. What is this? I asked. Mom blinked, startled. Dennis stood up fast. You weren't supposed to see that. What is it? I asked again. A loan application, he said curtly. We're putting the new mortgage under your name. I stared. What? Why would you? It's just paperwork, Mom cut in. You're not really responsible. It's for credit reasons. Temporary. But I'm 14. Almost 15, Dennis snapped. You live here, don't you? Eat our food? Sleep under our roof. I didn't ask for this, I whispered. You're part of the family, Mom said coldly. Act like it. That night I lay awake for hours. I Googled every word on that form. I didn't understand it all, but I understood enough to know they were using me. Not just emotionally, legally, and I had no one to tell. By summer, the changes were more aggressive. Mom canceled my library card. You spend too much time hiding in books. She took my sketchbook and burned it after Kayla claimed I'd drawn a mean picture of her. It was a rabbit, holding a sword, but that didn't matter. The final straw came one afternoon when I came home to find Kayla throwing a tantrum. Her tablet had died mid-game. She screamed for an hour. Instead of comforting her, Dennis barged into the attic, yanked the charger out of my wall and handed it to her. Why do you get to have electricity up here when she's upset? He shouted. I was doing homework. Doesn't matter. You're selfish. That night I called Camila. Camila Ruiz was the only person who still spoke to me like I mattered. We'd met in sophomore year during a group project. She had a quick laugh, curly hair, and a calmness I envied. Her aunt, Teresa, owned a little Italian place downtown. Camila said they were always busy, always tired, but always together. I can't do it anymore, I said into the phone. There was a pause. Then she said, come over. Stay as long as you need. I packed in silence, a backpack, my notebooks, and the only photo I had left of my dad. As I closed the attic door behind me, I heard laughter downstairs. Kayla's, Mom's, Dennis's. None of them noticed I was gone. Camila lived above the restaurant, in a small apartment that smelled like cinnamon and basil. Her Aunt Teresa didn't ask me questions the night I arrived. She just looked me in the eyes, handed me a warm plate of gnocchi, and said, You can sleep on the couch tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk work. It was the first time in months someone fed me, without a sigh. Rosetta's table wasn't fancy. It had checkered tablecloths, dim lighting, and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. But it pulsed with life, clattering pans, clinking wine glasses, bursts of laughter and music floating from the kitchen. Teresa ran it like a ship captain. Firm voice, sharp eyes, but a heart that beat for food and people. You want to stay here? She asked me the next morning, over coffee. I nodded. Then you'll work. We don't do pity. We do pasta. That was my first lesson in dignity. I started washing dishes, then bussing tables. I burned my hand on a pan, spilled wine on a customer, cried in the walk-in fridge more than once. But every night, I went to bed with aching feet and a full heart. Teresa didn't coddle me, but she saw me. Camila helped me enroll in night classes, so I wouldn't lose school credit. During the day, I memorized sauce ratios and wine pairings. At night, I studied macroeconomics and statistics. I kept a calendar on the wall with stickers: green for work shifts, blue for exams, gold stars for tips over $100. 2 months in, Teresa handed me a key to the studio above the restaurant. It's small, she warned. No oven, no AC, but it's yours. I cried. She hugged me, then pretended not to notice. I bought a second-hand mattress, a tiny fridge, a plant named Basil, and called it home. There was no Dennis pounding on the door, no Kayla stealing my things, no cold eyes from my mother, just me, my books, and the soft hum of life downstairs. My first paycheck, I bought myself a pair of kitchen shoes. Non-slip soles, black leather, 100% mine. I stared at them for a long time before I put them on. They felt like armor. The following year blurred into motion. I became a server, then a hostess, then shift manager. Teresa would bark, "Nina, count inventory," or "explain this overhead cost," like she was testing me. But when I got it right, her eyes softened. "You've got a head for this," she said one night. "Better than mine, honestly." She started letting me sit in on meetings with suppliers, watch her renegotiate wine contracts and plan seasonal menus. She taught me how to read people. Watch how they hold the fork. If it's tight, they're nervous. If it's loose, they're open to dessert. I soaked it all in. At 19, I was running Friday night service. At 20, I was helping onboard new hires. At 21, I was officially listed as assistant manager. Meanwhile, I stayed invisible to my mother. Every now and then, I'd hear updates from mutual contacts in Savannah. Kayla had won some academic award. Dennis had gotten promoted. My mother had joined a wine club. Not once did they call. Not once did they ask if I was safe. I stopped waiting. Instead, I built. Camila and I became partners in every sense: business, friendship, even family. We stayed up late designing new concepts, tweaking recipes, and dreaming about expansion. By the time I graduated college with a degree in business management, Teresa pulled me aside with tears in her eyes. "I'm retiring," she said. "This place, it should be yours." We took over Rosetta's table together. Then we opened another location across town. Then a third in the arts district. We hired staff with stories like mine, kids who'd been told they were too much or not enough. We paid well. We listened. We cared. I never spoke of my past. I didn't need to. Every plate of food I sent out was a declaration. I'm not who you said I was. I never was. By 25, I had my name on the lease of 3 thriving restaurants. I wasn't rich, not yet, but I was stable. I paid off all the hidden debt Dennis had racked up under my name, quietly cleaning up the financial mess they left behind without ever telling a soul. It took me almost 4 years to fix my credit score. For years of missed promotions, rejected loan applications, and awkward explanations to banks who looked at me like I was reckless. I wasn't. I was just a daughter they used like a name on a form. But I survived. No, I built. Camila and I had carved out something sacred. Rosetta's table was no longer just a restaurant. It was a place where forgotten people came to feel seen. Elderly women who dined alone but left smiling. Teenagers working their first job who were told they mattered. We hung photos of our staff on the walls. We ran pay-it-forward meal programs for families in need. And most nights I stayed late to wipe down counters, not because I had to, but because I could. Freedom tasted better than any dish on the menu. Then came the reservation. Camila was at her desk reviewing the catering contracts for a corporate gala when she paused, furrowing her brow. Big party Saturday night. 50 guests. Booked under Caldwell engagement. My stomach clenched. Caldwell. I hadn't heard the name spoken out loud in years. I didn't ask questions. I just said, I'll cover the floor that night. Camila looked at me. You sure? I nodded. Let's treat them like any other guest. But I knew. Deep down I knew. Saturday came. The restaurant glowed under warm lights. Wine chilled to the perfect temperature. The tables were dressed in ivory linens, tall candles flickering in glass holders. I stood upstairs in my office, adjusting my name badge on the navy blazer we designed for partners to wear on special occasions. Across the gold embroidery, Nina Clark, co-owner. I walked downstairs just as the guests arrived, and there she was, my mother. Her hair was perfectly curled, lipstick deep mauve, and her signature pearl earrings glinted under the chandeliers. Beside her, Dennis, a little grayer, still wearing that smug air like an accessory, and Kayla, grown, glowing, in a sparkly engagement dress with a man on her arm who looked like he played golf for a living. I froze. Then I smiled. It wasn't fake. It wasn't bitter. It was the smile of a woman who didn't need to prove anything anymore. They hadn't seen me yet. I moved between the tables, checking on servers, nodding at guests, offering wine pairings with practiced ease. The party settled in, laughter growing louder. My mother was holding court at the center table, regaling guests with stories I'm sure were polished for perfection. Then she saw me. Her eyes locked on mine. There was a pause, a flicker, recognition, and then she smiled. But it was the old smile, the cruel one, the one that came before something sharp. Well, well, she said loudly, drawing attention. Even the waitstaff dresses fancy these days. A few chuckles. Then Dennis added, didn't know they let anyone with a name badge serve wine now. Kayla turned. Oh my God, she whispered to her fiancé. That's my stepsister. I approached the table slowly, my voice calm. Welcome to Rosetta's table, I said. My name is Nina. I'll be ensuring everything goes smoothly tonight. My mother leaned back, swirling her glass. You're still doing this? Still playing house in someone else's kitchen? I said nothing. Dennis grabbed a flute of sparkling rose, lifted it toward me, and in one swift motion, tipped it. The cold liquid splashed down my blazer, staining the white shirt beneath. Gasps echoed across the room. Oh no, he said with mock sympathy. I made a mess. Better get someone to clean that up. Kayla laughed. I guess some people never move up. I stood still for 3 full seconds. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out the slim black leather binder, and laid it gently on the table. Camila appeared beside me, silent and composed. According to the service agreement signed upon booking, she said clearly, opening the binder. Any verbal harassment or physical misconduct toward staff or owners is grounds for immediate termination of service. Dennis frowned. Owners. Camila turned to him, eyes glinting. Oh, you didn't know? This establishment is co-owned by Nina Clark. You remember her, don't you? Silence. Then I spoke, softly but firmly. You'll need to leave. All 50 guests. Now. Dennis's mouth opened. Nothing came out. My mother's face drained of color. Kayla sputtered something about her engagement cake. I didn't flinch. Our staff began clearing the tables. Some guests tried to argue. Others just stared. A few pulled out phones. And I stood there, wine still dripping from my sleeve, heart beating steady, finally in control. The restaurant fell into a hush as guests realized what was happening. Some stood awkwardly, glancing between the staff and the party hosts, unsure whether to defend the bride-to-be or slowly distance themselves from the chaos. Others pulled out their phones, pretending to text but recording everything. You could feel the discomfort in the air. Thick, awkward, electric. Dennis tried to stand up tall, straighten his jacket. This is outrageous. We paid good money. Camila didn't even blink. And you signed a contract. Section 5.3. Immediate termination in the event of abuse toward staff or owners. No exceptions. I didn't know she was the owner, he snapped, pointing at me like I was something he stepped in. Camila's voice stayed calm. Now you do. Behind me, two members of our security team stepped into view. Quiet, unmoving. Kayla's fiancé leaned in and whispered something to her. She pulled away and glared. Are you seriously siding with her? I'm siding with the people not getting us thrown out of a restaurant, he muttered. My mother hadn't said a word. She sat there, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes locked on mine. Her pearls suddenly looked heavier on her neck. Then she finally spoke. You've changed. I tilted my head. No, I just stopped shrinking. The servers cleared the last of the wine glasses. Napkins were refilled. Candles snuffed out. It all happened with quiet precision, like we'd rehearsed this moment for years. Mrs. Caldwell, the woman who used to pinch my cheeks until I bruised, clutched her plate of ravioli like it was a holy relic. You can't take my dinner, she snapped as Miguel gently reached for it. This is harassment. I'm calling the health department, the media, the mayor. Miguel didn't say a word. He simply removed the plate. Red sauce splattered on her blouse. She shrieked like a banshee, flailing her arms as if someone had set her on fire. People started whispering. Phones pointed at her like she was the star of a bad reality show. Dennis turned beet red, fists clenched. You think you're better than us now, he growled, stepping toward me. That's when our security moved. One stepped between us, voice firm. Back away, sir. Another added, Savannah PD is already on the way. You'll want to be calm when they arrive. He froze mid-step. Rage clouded his eyes, but something else flickered behind them, fear. Mom. Kayla cried, do something. But Helen Clark just sat there, mascara streaking down her cheeks, looking older than I remembered. She tried to speak, but no words came. For once, she had nothing to say. The next 30 minutes unfolded like a slow-motion unraveling. The police arrived. Statements were taken. Phones played back recordings. Guests slipped out in clusters, murmuring to each other. Dennis was cuffed and escorted out. Public intoxication, attempted assault, violation of contract. His voice echoed down the block, still protesting. Kayla sobbed in a corner, her perfect engagement smeared with sauce and scandal. Her fiancé stood beside her, arms crossed, silent. He hadn't said a word in 10 minutes. Mrs. Caldwell was last to leave, covered in pasta, holding her heels in her hands, shrieking something about lawyers and Yelp reviews. And me? I stood at the entrance, blazer soaked in rose, arms crossed, not smiling, not gloating, just watching them go. 11 years ago, I left that family's house with a backpack and $43 in crumpled bills. Now they were leaving mine, escorted out the front door, reputation shattered, pride bleeding on the pavement. Camila came up beside me. You okay? I looked at her. More than okay. We stood there in the doorway of our restaurant, two women who had built everything from nothing. The applause came a few seconds later from the bar, where several regulars had watched everything unfold. It started with one slow clap, then another, then a wave of cheers like a toast to justice. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't revenge. It was liberation. 3 days later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, then another call, and another. By the fifth one, I picked up, more out of curiosity than concern. Nina. The voice was small, uncertain. It was my mother. Please don't hang up, she rushed. I need to explain. I didn't say anything. It's about Dennis. They're pressing charges. He could lose his job. You have to do something. I hung up. And then the online post started. First, my mother's. A dramatic Facebook post dripping in false remorse and fabricated details. My estranged daughter, who I've tried to love through all her bitterness, ambushed our family at my stepdaughter's engagement. We were humiliated. publicly, over nothing. Then Kayla joined in her Instagram story a carousel of carefully edited photos of the dinner, cropped just before the wine hit me. She added text. Some people just can't stand to see their little sister happy. I didn't respond. Camila texted me that night. We knew this was coming, but we're not letting them twist the truth. And she was right, because what they didn't know was that Rosetta's table had one of the most advanced security systems in the district, installed after a burglary attempt 3 years ago. Teresa insisted on it. HD cameras, motion-sensitive microphones, and auto backups every night. We had everything. The moment Dennis poured the wine, Kayla's laughter, my mother's insult, the plate pulled from Mrs. Caldwell's hands. Every word, every look. I clipped the footage, just the essentials. No edits, no captions, no music, just the truth. Then I posted it, not with rage, not with a caption calling anyone out. Just, here's what actually happened. It exploded. By morning, the video had been shared across Facebook groups, Reddit threads, and food industry forums. Former guests commented things like, I've eaten there for years. This doesn't surprise me. That place runs on respect. As someone who's been disowned, this hit me in the gut. Nina's face when she says, you'll need to leave, chills. And then came the duets, TikToks, voiceovers, people acting out the scene like it was a movie, memes of Mrs. Caldwell clutching her pasta with the text, not my ravioli. Food bloggers called it the pasta scandal. News outlets picked it up. Within 48 hours, it became a national story. Local restaurant owner shuts down abusive family at daughter's engagement party on camera. Even Rosetta's table trended on Yelp. And my family? They couldn't delete fast enough. My mother removed her post, but screenshots were everywhere. Kayla made her account private. Mrs. Caldwell's church suspended her from her volunteer position pending behavior review. Dennis's firm released a vague statement about internal review procedures. And the wedding? Cancelled. The venue didn't want the negative attention. The caterer pulled out. The fiancé? He went silent and then reportedly moved out. The fallout came fast. Sharp. Cold. Just like the silence they used to weaponize against me. And through it all, I didn't say a word. I showed up to work. I cleared tables. I trained new staff. I wiped down menus. And every so often, a guest would come up and whisper, you did the right thing. Or hug me. Or cry. It was overwhelming. But it was real. I wasn't a waitress anymore. I wasn't the invisible attic girl. I wasn't the girl who got pushed aside for a shinier daughter. I was the woman who owned the building. The video didn't just trend. It lived. It lived in comment sections where strangers shared their own stories of being scapegoated daughters, discarded siblings, overlooked children. It lived in DMs from women twice my age saying, I wish I had stood up to my family when I had the chance. It lived in every, you're an inspiration, from people I'd never met but somehow knew exactly how I felt. Within a week, our reservations tripled. Food bloggers reviewed us with new eyes, calling Rosetta's table a rare place where the food is rich, but the story behind it richer. One influencer called it the revenge restaurant and posted a mock menu with items like karma carbonara and pasta alla payback. We laughed. We leaned in. We printed t-shirts. But behind the humor, the fallout for my family was undeniable. Dennis was demoted, stripped of his team, his privileges, and his corporate credit card. Rumor had it he had to move out of their suburban house and into a rental. Kayla deleted all her social media and went silent. No wedding. No public apology. Just silence. As for my mother, she tried to pivot. She made one final Facebook post. It read, sometimes love makes you blind. I only wanted both my daughters to be happy. I never imagined this is how the world would learn our story. The comments were not kind. Gaslighting 101. You ignored your daughter for years. And now you're surprised she succeeded? She didn't make a scene. You did. She just made sure people saw it. The internet didn't let her escape the truth. But the real shift wasn't online. It was inside me. One night, after closing, I stood alone in the middle of the restaurant. The chairs were flipped, the lights low, the air smelled like garlic and lemon and something old and safe. I looked around at everything I had helped build, the photos of our team, the quiet strength in every detail, and I thought of her, of Helen Clark, the woman who used to kiss my forehead at bedtime, who braided my hair and read me stories, who taught me how to set a table with the forks in the right order, and then sat by while that table was used to humiliate me. She had made her choice, over and over. People asked me if I wanted to reconcile, if I would take her back now that everything had changed. But the truth is, I had already grieved her, not in one loud moment, but in 1,000 tiny silences. Every birthday ignored, every milestone missed, every cry that went unanswered. By the time she called me a waitress in my own restaurant, I wasn't angry. I was done. The last time she called, I answered, not because I wanted to hear her voice, but because I needed to close the door myself. "Nina," she said softly, like the past hadn't happened. "I was just thinking about how things ended. About Kayla. About you." Silence. "I didn't know," she continued. "I didn't know it would go so far." I waited. "I'm sorry. I truly am. I didn't realize you were hurting that much." I took a breath. "You didn't want to know." She fell quiet. "I was a child," I said, "and I begged for your attention. I screamed for your protection, and all you gave me were closed doors and cold shoulders. Nina, please, can't we fix this?" I looked out the window. The city lights flickered, soft and golden, reflecting in the wine glasses we'd just washed. "No," I said, not with anger, but with certainty, "because I'm not broken anymore." She didn't hang up. She didn't cry. She just went quiet, and I ended the call. I haven't heard from her since. The video stayed pinned to our page, not for publicity, not to hurt anyone, but as a marker, a reminder that sometimes the happy ending isn't reunion. It's release. It's choosing not to go back into a house where you were only ever a shadow. It's building a table so long and wide that people like you, forgotten, discarded, underestimated, always have a seat. Today, Rosetta's table is more than a restaurant. It's where the girl who once cried herself to sleep in an attic apartment now signs paychecks, trains leaders, and makes space for others to rise. It's where we serve forgiveness in small bites, but reserve the whole feast for those who earn it. Some families are chosen. Some bridges are meant to burn. And sometimes your peace is worth more than their apology. I held the test in my hand, staring at the 2 pink lines like they were a secret written just for me. After 3 long years of trying, of hoping, of crying quietly in the bathroom every month, it had finally happened. I was pregnant. I pressed the little plastic stick to my chest and let out a trembling breath. The baby was so small, still hidden, still quiet, but real. Inside me, growing, ours. In the kitchen, the October sun spilled through the windows, warm and golden, lighting up the table I had spent all morning decorating. My hands moved on instinct now, adjusting silverware, fluffing napkins, checking the roast for the 5th time. Today was my mother-in-law's 60th birthday, and every inch of the house was dressed for celebration. But I had my own secret to celebrate, my own joy humming just beneath the surface of it all. I imagined the moment. Ethan would take my hands, eyes wide with wonder, and spin me around the room. He'd laugh, maybe cry, kiss my stomach, say something ridiculous like, "We need to buy a crib today." We'd talk about names, about painting the guest room, about building a world for someone we hadn't even met yet, but already loved. I heard his voice before I saw him. "Babe, you in here?" "Kitchen," I called, stuffing the test back into my jeans pocket, my voice too bright, too casual. Ethan stepped into the room with that effortless charm that always made me feel like the luckiest woman in the world. His ocean blue shirt made his hazel eyes look almost gold in the sunlight. He kissed my cheek and took in the table with a low whistle. Wow, my mom's gonna love this. She deserves it, I said, smoothing the tablecloth unnecessarily. 60's a big deal. He leaned in and whispered, not as big as the news you've got for me, apparently. I smiled, almost shy. Later, when it's just us. He grinned and kissed my forehead. You're killing me, Anna. The doorbell rang before I could answer, and just like that, the moment was gone. The Mitchells had arrived. Eleanor walked in like royalty, her silver hair pinned up in a perfect chignon, her navy suit sharp enough to make you sit up straighter just looking at her. Anna, sweetheart, she said, kissing my cheek. Everything looks absolutely perfect. Thank you, I said, offering her a glass of wine. I hope it's to your liking. She smiled with rare softness. It's lovely, truly. Frank, my father-in-law, nodded silently and handed over a bouquet of white lilies and a bottle of aged scotch. That was his way of saying well done. The rest of the guests trickled in, Ethan's sister Angela and her husband Mark, their 2 kids already racing through the house, a few of Eleanor's retired teaching colleagues, some neighbors from across the street. The house was full of voices, clinking glasses, the smell of roast pork and garlic potatoes drifting through the air like a memory from childhood. Everyone said the same thing. Anna, how do you do it? This is incredible. You're amazing. I smiled, said thank you, passed plates, refilled drinks, and all the while I kept touching my stomach like I was silently telling the baby, you're already loved. You're already here. Ethan played the perfect host. Charming, attentive, hilarious. He told a story about a work trip gone wrong. Something about a hotel mix-up and a man in boxer shorts screaming at the front desk. The room erupted in laughter, even Eleanor. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, my heart full. He looked so alive, so confident, so mine. For a moment, I believed it. All of it. The clink of glasses, the scent of cake frosting, the hum of chatter in the living room. I wanted to freeze it there, to stop time right in that second. Before I found out, before everything I believed about my life shattered. But that came later. For now, I was just Anna Mitchell, wife, hostess, mother-to-be, and I had no idea that within hours, I'd be someone else entirely. It started with something simple. A question from Eleanor over dessert. Where's Ethan? She asked, glancing around the crowded living room. Haven't seen him in a bit. I looked up from the coffee cups I was arranging. I hadn't noticed he was gone. He was just here. Maybe he stepped out for a call. I offered, though my voice felt strangely distant, like I was already somewhere else. Angela chimed in, probably in his study. He still keeps all his work files in there, right? I nodded and excused myself, wiping my hands on a towel as I walked down the hallway. My pulse quickened, but I told myself it was nothing. Just a call. Just a client. That's what he'd say. That's what he always said. The door to his office was half shut. A sliver of warm lamplight spilled across the hallway floor. I reached out to knock, but then stopped. His voice floated through the gap, low and intimate, and nothing like the voice he used with me. I know, I hate it too, he whispered, and I heard a small chuckle, tender and soft. But what do you want me to do? The house is full of people. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. My hand hovered above the doorknob. I can't just walk out. It's her mother's birthday. That would look bad even for me. A pause, then a laugh. No, of course she doesn't know. Anna believes everything I say. Like clockwork. My stomach turned. He continued. I'll tell her soon. A few more weeks. Let the party dust settle. Then I'll say we're just not working anymore. That it's no one's fault. That we drifted. You know, the usual soft landing garbage. I staggered back half a step, pressing a hand to my chest. I mean, come on. She still thinks we're going to have a baby, he said, followed by a cruel laugh. Poor things, probably planning names. The queasy warmth in my belly curdled to ice. She's sweet, he added mockingly, but she's not you. She's soft, predictable. She'll cry, maybe beg, but she'll let go. Eventually. I backed away from the door as if it had burned me. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't want to. The hallway tilted under my feet. My legs turned to liquid. I barely made it to our bedroom before the tears came. Silent, uncontrollable, feral. I clutched the edge of the dresser, gasping like someone drowning above water. Every breath was a betrayal. How long had it been going on? Months? Longer? And Madison, was that her name? The one from the texts? The one in the red dress, the perfume I'd smelled on his coat once and believed when he said it was his co-worker's handshake hug? The dots connected themselves. Too fast, too clear, and suddenly I couldn't unsee them. In the pocket of my jeans, the pregnancy test pressed into my leg. I pulled it out and stared at it. The two pink lines glared back at me like a cruel joke. How was I supposed to tell him now? How could I say, "We're going to be parents," to a man who was already planning to leave, to a man who thought I was weak, predictable, disposable? I heard his laughter from down the hallway, heard glasses clinking, the sound of a cake being cut, life moving on, oblivious, while mine was splitting down the middle. I washed my face, bit down hard on the scream building in my throat. I looked at myself in the mirror, a woman trying to hold her shape. Then I smiled, just enough, just wide enough to pass. By the time I returned to the living room, Ethan had reappeared, charming as ever, holding court like nothing had happened. His arm brushed mine as I passed, and he whispered, "You good?" I nodded. I lied, because the truth was, I had never been less okay in my life. That night, after the last guest had left and the dishwasher hummed softly in the kitchen, Ethan kicked off his shoes and dropped onto the couch like a man who had just won something. He loosened his tie and patted the seat next to him. "Come on," he said. "Sit. You've been running around all day." I sat, but only because my legs still hadn't stopped shaking. He smiled at me, the same smile he gave to Eleanor earlier when she complimented the wine. The same smile he used when he was telling his ridiculous hotel story. The smile that used to feel like home. "So," he said, nudging my leg playfully, "what's the big news?" I looked at him, at his familiar face, and felt like I was seeing a stranger wearing a mask I used to love. My hand went instinctively to the pocket where the test had been earlier. I'd taken it out and hidden it under the sink. The proof of my joy, now a secret I didn't know how to share. "I'll tell you tomorrow," I said, managing a soft smile. "I'm exhausted." His brows creased with mild disappointment, but he shrugged. "All right, I'll hold onto the suspense." I watched him walk down the hallway to our bedroom, his shoulders relaxed, humming under his breath like he hadn't spent the evening plotting a quiet exit from our marriage. When the bedroom door clicked shut, I sat there alone, surrounded by half-empty wine glasses and crumpled napkins and leftover cake. The night had been a celebration, but it felt like a wake. I didn't sleep. I lay next to Ethan, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, wondering how many nights he'd slept beside me with her name in his mouth, her face in his mind. At some point, I realized the pattern, the unexplained late nights at work, the business trips that got extended, the cologne that wasn't his usual brand, the shirt I found in the laundry with a lipstick stain he claimed came from his sister hugging him too hard at a party. And I had believed it. Every lie. I told myself he was stressed, that the tension in his shoulders was from work, that the way he sometimes pulled away when I touched his arm at dinner was just distraction, that the way his phone never left his side anymore was just modern work life. God, how much had I ignored just to keep the illusion intact? The next morning, I got up early and started cleaning. Not because I had energy, but because I didn't know what else to do. I needed motion. I needed something to keep the panic from taking over. I scrubbed countertops that didn't need scrubbing, rearranged spice jars, wiped the inside of the microwave 3 times. Meanwhile, Ethan went for his usual post-party run, dressed in sweats, earbuds in, acting like the night before had been nothing but a success. The moment the front door closed behind him, I went straight for his phone. I knew the code. Our wedding anniversary. That irony burned. It only took a few seconds to find what I was looking for. The contact didn't have a name, just a number, but the thread of messages was unmistakable. I missed you all night. I hate pretending. When can we be done with this? And then, she won't see it coming. She still thinks we're solid. Attached were photos. One of them together at some overpriced restaurant I didn't recognize. One of her, Madison, in a red dress, the same one Rachel had described. Another photo taken on our back porch. My back porch. The wind chimes I hung last summer were in the background. I barely made it to the bathroom before the nausea overtook me. This wasn't morning sickness. This was betrayal. I sat on the cold tile floor, forehead against my knees, tears mixing with bile in my throat. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make the pain visible, but I couldn't, because no one else knew yet. To them, I was still the happy wife, the perfect hostess, the lucky woman who had it all. But I knew the truth now, and I couldn't unknow it. I didn't want to call Rachel. I didn't want to hear the sound of her voice, kind and knowing. I didn't want the sympathy, the outrage, the confirmation that what I'd heard, what I'd seen was real. But I also couldn't carry it alone. Not all of it. So I texted her, "Can we meet? Today. It's important." She replied instantly, "Of course. Same place?" At 11 a.m., I sat in the back corner of a little cafe we used to visit every Saturday morning before life got complicated and busy. I held a mug of tea I hadn't touched and tried to think of the right words. How do you even start a sentence like, "My husband is planning to leave me and doesn't know I'm pregnant"? Rachel arrived 5 minutes later, hair pulled into a low bun, denim jacket already slipping off one shoulder as she spotted me. Her eyes widened as she took in my face. "Anna," she said, sliding into the booth. Are you okay?" I shook my head, just once, and then the words came. I told her everything. About the phone call behind the office door. About the messages on his phone. About the photos. About Madison. About the test. I told her I didn't cry during the party. That I smiled and passed cake like everything was fine. That I lay awake next to him all night and stared at the ceiling, wishing I could be someone else, anywhere else. That I hadn't even told him yet. That I didn't know how. Rachel didn't interrupt. She just listened, her eyes growing darker with every sentence, her mouth tightening with quiet fury. When I finally stopped, my throat dry and my hand shaking, she leaned forward and whispered, "That son of a bitch!" It was the first time I'd laughed in days. A short, cracked laugh that made my chest ache. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, reaching for my hand. "Or suspect something?" "I don't know," I whispered. Maybe I didn't want to see it. Maybe I didn't believe someone like him would throw it all away. She hesitated, then said quietly, "I saw him once. A few weeks ago. With her. At the mall." I froze. "I didn't tell you," she continued, "because I thought maybe it was innocent." She was pretty, blonde. He was standing close. They were looking at rings. I didn't breathe. "Jewelry?" I asked. She nodded. She tried one on. He kissed her on the temple. I told myself it was probably work-related, maybe a favor. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. "He was buying her a ring," I said flatly. "He's planning to marry her after he divorces me." Rachel paled. "Anna, I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," I said. "It's mine. For not asking questions. For ignoring the signs. For trusting him when my gut screamed not to." She squeezed my hand. "Don't say that. Trusting your husband isn't a flaw." "No," I said, looking down at my stomach. "But trusting the wrong man might be." We sat in silence for a long time. Around us, the cafe filled and emptied and filled again. Waitresses refilled mugs. The espresso machine hissed. Someone dropped a spoon. I barely noticed any of it. Finally, Rachel asked, "What are you going to do?" I looked her in the eye. My voice didn't shake this time. "I'm going to see a lawyer." "Good," she said. "And what about the baby?" I placed a hand over my stomach. "I'm keeping it." "You won't be alone," Rachel said firmly. "Whatever you need, I'm here." I believed her, and for the first time since the world cracked open, I felt something unfamiliar flicker inside me. Not rage, not grief, strength. Maybe I didn't need to survive this alone after all. But even if I had to, I could. I spent the afternoon preparing dinner, not because I wanted to cook for Ethan, but because I needed a setting, a stage, somewhere to place the truth and let it speak for itself. I made his favorite, steak with garlic butter, mashed potatoes with roasted rosemary, Caesar salad with fresh Parmesan. I set the table like it was a date night we hadn't had in years. I lit candles. I opened the wine he liked. I even changed into a dress he once said made me look beautiful, back when I still believed he meant it. At 6:03, the front door opened and his voice called out cheerfully, "Smells amazing in here." I smiled and met him at the door. "I thought we could have a nice dinner." He raised a brow, amused. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said. "Just us." He kissed my cheek and wandered into the dining room, humming as he poured himself a glass of wine. "Wow," he said, looking at the table. "This looks incredible, babe." I sat across from him. "You're welcome." We ate mostly in silence. I let him talk about work, some annoying client, a coworker who never replied to emails on time. He asked me once if I was okay. I smiled and said I was tired. That was all he needed to hear. He never asked again. After dessert, he reached for his wine glass, but I stopped him. "Ethan," I said softly, "we need to talk." He froze, just for a second, then placed his glass back down, fingers tightening around the stem. "About what?" "About us." He leaned back, slightly, his expression guarded. "Okay, what's going on?" I didn't answer right away. I stood, walked to the other side of the table, and sat next to him on the couch. I wanted him close. I wanted to see his eyes when the mask fell. "I know," I said. His brow furrowed. "Know what?" "I know about Madison." His jaw didn't drop. He didn't gasp. Just blinked. Once. Slowly. "What are you talking about?" "I heard your phone call during the party," I continued. "I read the messages. I saw the pictures. You can stop pretending now." A long pause. Then, quietly, "How long have you known?" "Since your mother's birthday," I said. "Happy anniversary." He rubbed his hands over his face, exhaled, and looked down at the floor. "I didn't want it to happen like this." "But you did want it to happen." He looked up at me, eyes full of something between shame and resignation. "Yes." "Do you love her?" Silence, then a nod. I swallowed hard. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Maybe because the hurt had already settled in. Maybe because part of me knew all along. "And me?" I asked. "Did you ever love me?" He looked at me then. Really looked. "I did. I still care about you, Anna. But not enough to stay faithful. Not enough to be honest." "I was going to tell you," he said. I didn't want to hurt you." I laughed, bitter and cold. "Too late." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "There's more," I said. "I'm pregnant." That got him. His head snapped toward me, eyes wide. "What?" "I found out the morning of the party," I said. "I was going to tell you, before I found out who you really are." He stood up and began pacing. "You're serious?" I nodded. He ran both hands through his hair. "Oh my God, this changes everything." "No," I said. "It doesn't." He stopped. "Anna, I'm keeping the baby," I said calmly. "And I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." His mouth opened, then closed. "I gave you 5 years of my life, Ethan," I said. And I would have given you 10 more, but you gave yourself to someone else. You made your choice. He sat down slowly, like the weight of his lies had finally settled on his shoulders. I didn't think it would go this far. It did, I whispered. And now we're done. He didn't argue. He just nodded. And in that silence, I felt something inside me shift. Not break. Not collapse. Strength. Ethan packed a bag that night. Not everything, just the basics. A few shirts, a pair of shoes, his laptop. He said he'd come back for the rest when things were less tense. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't throw his clothes out the window like a woman in a movie might have. I just stood at the door and watched the man I thought I knew walk away without looking back. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed felt louder than any argument could have been. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold before I ever took a sip. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From exhaustion. From the overwhelming need to survive. At 8 a.m. sharp, I walked into the law office of Michael Hargrove, a man Rachel had recommended months ago when her cousin went through a divorce. His office smelled like leather and old books and quiet power. "Tell me everything," he said gently, and I did. I told him about the affair, the texts, the photos. I told him I was pregnant, that I wanted to keep the child, that I didn't want a drawn-out courtroom war. But I also wasn't going to be the woman who let her cheating husband walk away clean. He listened, took notes, nodded at the right places. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "You're in a strong position, Anna." He stepped out. "You have proof. You're carrying his child. The law is on your side." I felt a strange sensation, then a flicker of control. It wasn't much, but it was enough to stand on. After the meeting, I went to the clinic to confirm the pregnancy. 6 weeks. Everything looked normal. The doctor handed me prenatal vitamins and a pamphlet titled, "Your Body and Your Baby, First Trimester." I held it in my hands like it was a passport to a country I hadn't meant to visit alone. When she asked if the father knew, I said yes. I didn't mention he was now an ex-husband in waiting. Next, I stopped by work. My boss, Linda Carlson, was already at her desk, sipping coffee and going through paperwork. I sat across from her and said the words I hadn't rehearsed, but somehow still came out steady. "I'm going through a divorce, and I'm pregnant." She blinked, then set her coffee down. "Oh, Anna, I'm okay," I said quickly, even though I wasn't. "I just thought you should know. I'll keep working as long as I can. I need the income, and I need the distraction." She nodded slowly. "You've always been one of the most reliable people here. Take whatever time you need, and when you're ready for maternity leave, we'll figure it out." I wanted to cry at her kindness. Instead, I smiled. "Thank you." I came home to a house that felt too quiet. Ethan's shoes were gone from the doorway. His toothbrush no longer sat beside mine. His cologne no longer lingered in the hallway. I walked through each room slowly, like I was meeting them again for the first time. In the guest room, the one we had once said would be the nursery, I ran my fingers along the windowsill and tried to picture a crib, a rocking chair, a new life. Later that night, I FaceTimed my parents. They were shocked. My mother cried. My father's voice shook with restrained anger. But when I told them I was pregnant, something changed. My father sat back, his eyes suddenly soft. My mother wiped her face and whispered, "A baby, you're going to be a mother." "Yes," I said, "on my own." "You won't be alone," she replied. "You have us." And again, like with Rachel, like with Michael, like with Linda, I felt it. Support. Real, steady, grounded support. I didn't know how the next week would look, or the next month, or the next year. But I knew this much. I could breathe. And that was enough for now. 3 weeks after Ethan left, I finally took down the framed photo of us in the hallway. The one where we were standing on a cliff in Big Sur, wind in our hair, sunlight in our eyes, pretending we were invincible. I stared at it for a long time before carefully wrapping it in newspaper and tucking it into a box labeled Old Life. I didn't throw it away. I wasn't there yet, but I didn't need it on the wall anymore. The days became rhythm. I worked. I cooked. I went to appointments. I started a journal, not the kind where you write about your feelings with flowers in the margins, but one where I recorded symptoms, cravings, strange dreams, baby name ideas, and notes to the little life growing inside me. "You're the reason I get up when I don't want to," I wrote one night. "You're the reason I haven't fallen apart." My body began to change, subtle at first. A tighter waistline, a deeper hunger, a fatigue that no coffee could cure. But inside I was rebuilding, not just from Ethan's betrayal, but from years of being small to keep someone else comfortable. Years of folding myself down so his ego could stretch out on the couch. Now I was unfolding. Rachel helped me clear out his things. She didn't ask questions, just brought trash bags and determination. "Do you want to burn this?" she joked, holding up one of his college sweatshirts. I laughed. Tempting. But no. Let's just drop it at Goodwill. Let someone else warm their arms with what I've outgrown. We worked in silence, mostly. Boxed up books. Tossed old razors. Scrubbed the bathroom like we were erasing his presence. When we finished, the house felt lighter. Airier. Like I could finally hear myself think. That night, I lit a single candle and curled up on the couch with a bowl of soup and a baby book Rachel had gifted me. "You're stronger than you think," the first page read. And for once, I believed it. Ethan tried to contact me twice. Once by text, "Can we talk?" "I miss you." I didn't reply. The second time he showed up at the door. It was raining. He looked soaked, disheveled, like a man who'd lost his script. "I just want to talk," he said. "No," I replied, calm and steady. "You don't. You want to feel better." "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," I corrected. "Now live with it." He looked over my shoulder toward the hallway, maybe expecting to see some trace of his former life. The shoes, the photos, the woman who used to say yes too easily. But that woman wasn't here anymore. "I hope Madison was worth it," I said gently, then closed the door. I didn't cry afterward. I sat down, folded a load of laundry, and put on soft music while I made a grocery list. Not because I wasn't angry, not because I wasn't still healing, but because I was doing something Ethan never thought I could do. I was moving forward. On Sunday morning, I walked into a local parenting class at the community center. Alone. I introduced myself to the group and took a seat in the back. A woman named April sat beside me and smiled. "First one." I nodded. "Me too," she said. "My ex ran off to Colorado with his yoga instructor." We both laughed. There was something healing about that laugh. Like we weren't victims. We were women in motion. Women becoming. And as I drove home later that afternoon, the fall sun warm on my face, I realized something else. I wasn't just surviving. I was standing. And soon, I'd be ready to run. The first time I heard her cry, everything else disappeared. The white walls of the hospital, the sterile scent, the nurse's gentle rush around me. None of it mattered. All I could hear was her voice, tiny, fierce, undeniably alive. They placed her on my chest, and she was warm and damp and pink and perfect. I stared down at her, this little soul who had grown quietly inside me through months of heartbreak and change, and whispered, "Hi, baby. It's just us now." And it was enough. I named her Clara Grace. Clara because it means bright, clear. And that's what she was to me, the clarity after the storm. Grace because I'd survived only by learning to give myself some. Rachel was the first to visit. She brought flowers and a stuffed fox and a giant thermos of soup. "You did it," she said, eyes wide with pride. "No," I replied, "we did." The nurses said I was one of the calmest first-time mothers they'd ever seen. I didn't tell them it was because I'd already lived through the hardest part. Labor had nothing on betrayal. My parents came 2 days later. My father held Clara like she was made of glass. and my mother wept so gently I almost didn't notice until she kissed my forehead. "I'm sorry for everything we didn't see," she whispered, "but I see you now." I stayed at their house for the first month, not because I couldn't manage on my own, but because it gave them a chance to love me in the way I hadn't let them before. And maybe because I needed to be loved without condition. Ethan sent a letter. No return address. Just his handwriting on cream-colored paper. "I don't deserve to be a father, but if you ever want her to know me, I'll wait." I read it once, then again. Then I folded it and tucked it into the back of Clara's baby book. Not as an invitation, but as a record. A reminder that people make choices, and those choices shape everything. I never replied. We moved back into my house that winter. I painted the nursery yellow. I hung up tiny prints of flowers and clouds and framed a quote above her crib. "You are loved. You are safe. You are wanted." And I meant it with every cell in my body. Some nights, when Clara wouldn't sleep, I'd walk the hallway with her cradled against my shoulder, whispering songs I barely remembered learning. I'd press my cheek to hers and tell her stories, not about Ethan, but about strength, about joy, about beginnings that come after endings, about how she saved me without even knowing it. I started writing again. Not just journals this time, but real stories. About women finding their voices. About mothers who rise. I submitted one to a small online magazine. They published it. A month later, another editor reached out. Then another. People wanted to hear what I had to say. I created a small writing nook in the corner of the living room, right beside Clara's play mat. She'd lie on her back and kick her legs while I typed. Every once in a while, I'd read her a line, just to see if she smiled. She always did. And on the rare day I felt the old sadness creep back in, the loneliness, the ache of what was lost, I'd open the front door, step into the sunlight, and whisper, "Look what we built, baby. Just us." Clara would blink up at me, gummy and grinning, and I'd remember that I hadn't just survived. I had started over. And in this quiet, honest life, with its laundry piles and lullabies, its 3 a.m. feedings and 6 p.m. sunsets, I found something Ethan never gave me. Peace. She doesn't know it yet, but Clara is my redemption. And when she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her, "Your father left, but I stayed. You were never abandoned. You were chosen every day, every minute by me." Because in the end, she's all I need now.